Today we're speaking with Bennett Baer, who is the COO of CTD Solutions Group. So Bennett, can you first provide us with a brief background of yourself before we introduce today's topic?
Oh, thank you, Dustin. Happy to. I am, more than anything, a product marketing guy. I was formerly the Chief Marketing Officer with and VP of Strategy with Huawei. And I've worked at Unisys, British Telecom, Avnet, and a number of large corporations. And throughout my career as a product marketer, you tend to look at how you make something, whether it's a product or service, and supply is a part of that. I would not call myself an expert, as many of your colleagues and audience are, but I think I could perhaps shed a few things that what do we do and how does the rest of the organization look at supply chain? And I think talking about supply chain and where we're going with the technology is kind of the theme I hope we can discuss today.
Great. So can you talk about the technologies in the supply chain?
Yeah, if you recall, you were kind enough to talk with me previously, and if you look at the screen, this is a diagram that used that discussion, and I discussed a concept which is called enterprise social. If you think of something like LinkedIn, and you think about the groups in LinkedIn, if Dustin, if you and I are a product or service team, we're making something, we then have the manufacturing team that expands further for sales and customer care. It goes eventually to the distribution organization and goes out to the customers. And interconnected to this are things like SharePoint, your CRM, you add communications to this, and eventually the customer journey gets mapped into this. And customer journey mapping is something relatively new where you're able to look at the interactions between the organization who's selling it and the end user. And internally, you can even look at the interactions. This is one of the things I did at Huawei all the way into supply chain, where we can use communications, combine it with CRM, and add a score to that, which is known as gamification, so that it goes in an employee's HR jacket. If you come up with a great idea, that gets scored, it gets logged, it goes in your HR file, and at the end of the year, we can talk about that in your review. So where we've gone today, if I can get the slide to advance. Naturally, it's not. So if we look at this slide, this is where I think we are today. And the purpose of CTD is to help large organizations get into new business. But what we've found in doing it unique is looking at supply and technology as this end-to-end process. You've got supply that goes into the business and gets, for whatever is going to be made or produced, that then gets distributed, and eventually it goes to the customers and end users. And so if you think about the technology around that, we've expanded what they call customer journey mapping to go all the way from supply through the internal systems and processes, through the distribution channels, and eventually to the end consuming users. We can score that. We can add a valuation to that. Now, what gets interesting is we've got, and this is really, I think, one of the really interesting things for supply chain is your ability to build data ecosystems. And we're working with a partner, it's called Mingle.io. They're doing secure commingling of big database containers, which sounds really complex. The problem is, and I'll use Boeing as an example. That this was one of our first projects where we tried this with. And Boeing has 100,000 plus suppliers for them to make airplanes. And the problem for the supply chain and logistics guys is that they don't have the ability to look at the data for the commercial aviation and let them see the Department of Defense stuff. What this does is, what Mingle does is allow you to do that. And probably the easiest way to describe it is if we're looking at an Excel spreadsheet, you can see columns B, D, M, and Z, and nothing else. And it's a zero trust environment, so I control my data, you control yours, and we control what can be seen. And this is what's very different, especially if you're thinking about somebody like Boeing with 100,000 guys supplying things to them. You obviously want to develop a scale of economy, but the big is now we can do and commingle that securely, because most people, when they think big data, they throw it at what's called a data lake. Everybody puts their data in, and I have to trust you, and you have to trust me, or we give it to some third party to give us the reports that we want. That doesn't work terribly well. And especially in situations in healthcare where you have HIPAA compliancy, or with Boeing where you have Department of Defense and you can't let the commercial aviation guys see what's going on the DoD side. So this is one of the huge changes, I think, that's coming for supply chain and technology in the way that they can build data ecosystems and share that and create new ways to do business. I think it's almost the opposite of blockchain, where everybody can see what's going on. And the other thing that we're doing that's kind of unique is this ability to do the interaction mapping, that you can trace any one supplier and what's going on and what is the relationship and what is the value of that contribution to the effort of whatever it is I'm making. And you can even break it down by the different individuals or different offices within that supplier organization and what they're doing and how quickly they react. And that all gets scored and quantified. And this is kind of the conclusion of it, Dustin. I think we're going to see leaps forward in technology and the ability to quantify our relationships and the impact that they have in the business. And what I find exciting is that this is going to create a very different dynamic in the way we do business and the way we value it. Because there's always the time value of money, especially in supply chain. And if you can quantify that, it's kind of like in cloud business. Cloud technology really has nothing to do. It's really about money and how the money moves around the table. And as a cloud supplier of Huawei, what I wanted to do was be in the middle of a business with billions and billions of pounds through every hour, and I take a tiny little taste on each and every one. And I think we're going to see different models like that come into supply chain and really changing it thanks to technology. And that's it. That's my thought for the day.
And thanks again for sharing today, Bennett.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dustin.